Okay, we got our final handshakes in. Now we're going to look at a final conflict. You know, this world is full of wars. Jesus tells that over in Matthew 24. There's wars and rumors of wars. And like I've said before, you can check right now. And there's probably at least 50, 60 wars going on. Now, they're not all world wars or nation against nation. There's civil wars within countries. Of course, we know about Israel and Iran and Israel and Hamas, and we know about Ukraine and Russia. Jesus said wars and rumors of wars. All of our life there's been a war going on. But there's going to come a time when the final conflict occurs. You know, ever since the beginning of time, ever since the beginning of creation, there's been a conflict between Satan and God. You know, we read about that in Genesis. And all down through history, down through the ages, Satan has done everything he can to disrupt God's plan. I mean, he even tried to have him killed several times. Satan knew the plan that God had for salvation, that Jesus had to come and die on the cross, be obedient to his Father, and Satan tried to disrupt that. I mean, how many times do we read about Satan trying to stop Jesus from being born, stopped him from being raised up as a child, tried to stop him from going to the cross? There's always been a conflict between Satan and God. There's always been a conflict between Satan and us. Think about it. But there's going to come a time when there's a final conflict. Satan no more. How many ever said to yourself, man, if Satan wasn't around, it would be a lot better world? You know? Well, there's going to come a time when that's going to happen. The final conflict. And in our study that we've been doing over the last 5-6 weeks, the end time events, God's prophetic calendar, looking at all the upcoming events for the future. We are going to look at the final conflict. Now, that's not the end of the study. We've got one more study next week. But the final conflict we're going to look at tonight, or this morning, between God and Satan. No more Satan after this. Think about that. Hey, so last week we looked at the millennium. You know, we've looked at the rapture and we looked at the second coming of Christ, and we looked at the judgment of the nations, and we looked at the millennium last week. And when we looked at the millennium last week, we all have questions about that 1,000-year reign of Christ. And we found out last week what the millennium is. We found out when it begins. And we found out that who's going to be living on this earth during that time, that 1,000-year reign of Christ. And I've been asked, why does there have to be a millennium? Why does there have to be a 1,000-year reign of Christ before eternity starts? Well, we found that out in our study last week. And we found out, too, what this world, what this earth is going to be like during this 1,000 years. We just spoke about wars and rumors of wars. Well, we found out last week that during that 1,000-year reign of Christ, there's going to be no more wars, no more famines, no more diseases, no more birth defects. You know, people are going to live to be an old age, and they're going to be productive years. We read over in Isaiah chapter 65 where it said that nobody's going to live a long time to where somebody's going to say that was a wasted life. It says even an old man's life will be fulfilled. No more death. Over and done with in that 1,000-year reign of Christ. And there are other descriptions. We read scriptures for everything that we said. We always do that. We let God talk to us, not Mike Roach. We let God talk to us through His Word, and that's what we do every Sunday. But during that study in the millennium there, you had to look at Amos, you had to look at Zechariah, you had to look at Isaiah, Ezekiel, had to look at all of those. And we got scriptures from each one to show what this 1,000-year reign of Christ was going to be like. But now, the 1,000 years is over with in our study. The 1,000 years is over with. And we're going to look at that final conflict. What happens after that 1,000 years? Flip over there in the book of Revelation, chapter 20. We're going to read that here in a minute. It's time to look at the end of the 1,000 years. The final conflict between Satan and God. Revelation chapter 20. We're going to read it and then we're going to back up and review just a little bit about that millennium time, because we got to set the stage for it. I tell you what, let's go ahead and review now, and then we'll let's set the stage now for this final conflict. Remember, the 1,000-year reign of Christ. There's people in their glorified bodies. We believers, remember. Only at the end of the tribulation period, at the end of the judgment of the nations, when the 1,000 years starts, everybody that goes into that kingdom age, everybody that goes into the 1,000-year reign of Christ, everybody that goes into the millennium is going to be a true believer. Some's going to be in, like us, will be in our glorified bodies. But then there's going to be other people who lived through the tribulation period and got saved. Remember, during the tribulation period, 1/2 or maybe 3/4 of the world's population is going to die off. And most of them in the last 3.5 years. So the earth's population is going to be decimated. Somebody's got to repopulate the earth. So those people who believed the gospel, believed that Christ was coming back to set up His kingdom, it was preached during the 7-year tribulation period. Those humans who believed that and survived the tribulation period in their human bodies will go into the kingdom, into the 1,000-year reign of Christ. Those people will, like I said, be in their natural bodies. They'll get married. They'll have children. For 1,000 years, somebody's got to repopulate the earth, and that's those human beings there. Okay? Now, I can read this better than I can explain it. Okay? So, I wrote this down. The humans who entered the kingdom at the beginning were all believers and served Jesus. We got that. Now, all the children born to these believers are going to be in their natural bodies, of course, and they're going to have a natural heart, just the way we do right now. And what does Jeremiah 17:9 say? It says the heart is deceitful. Do we know that? Yeah, I think we do, don't we? The heart is deceitful and desperately wicked. Who can know it? So these natural-born children during this 1,000-year reign of Christ are going to have this natural desire to sin. Now, they're going to be raised by true believers, but they themselves, these children, are going to have to become true believers. Just like today, You find a good Christian man and woman get married and they have children. The husband and wife, the father and mother are Christians, dedicated, but they have children. And these children have to be raised up to know God, to love God, and give their life to Him also. Some of them do, some of them don't. It's going to be the same way during the millennium. These people these humans in their natural bodies are going to have children. And remember, over in chapter 19, it says that Jesus will rule with a rod of iron. Everybody. And it says over in Isaiah that the world is going to be full of the knowledge of God. Everybody is going to have to worship God. Some will worship Him because they love Him, those in their natural bodies. And then some of them will, just like today, they'll turn against Him. They're just going to church because they have to. You know, remember how you were when you was a little child or when you raised your children up, you know, and you'd get them out of bed and you say, it's time to go to church, time to go to church. Oh, do we have to? Say, yes, you have to. So they come. That's what's going to be in the millennium. These little children are going to be raised up having to go worship God. They have that natural heart. So there's always these people who are rebellious against all authority. Some of these little babies that's born during the millennium and be raised up into adults are going to have this natural rebellious attitude. Now, that sets up the final conflict. So flip over there in the book of Revelation and chapter 20 and down there, verse 7. Revelation 20, verse 7. Remember, the 1,000 years have been great. No oppression of any kind. A wonderful life for everybody. Satan's been bound up for 1,000 years and thrown into a bottomless pit. Not able to influence the world anymore. But the 1,000 years are up. What happens? Look at verse 7. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison. So here he comes again. He's always coming back and aggravating you. And after he's loosed from his prison, verse 8, and he shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle to battle, the number of whom is the sand of the sea. From the who are these people he's going to deceive? Those humans who were born during the millennium, those who had that natural heart, those who have that natural tendency to rebel against authority. Oh, they went to worship services. They had to. So they went to worship services, but they were rebellious in their heart. So at the end of the 1,000 years, Satan is turned loose one more time to deceive the nations, and he deceives them. Let's see what he does. Let me read that again. And he shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. I mean, how many people are there? How big is this army? You can't number them. Verse 9. And what does this army do? And they went up into the breadth of the earth, and they compassed the camp of the saints about. They surrounded the camp of the saints, the beloved city. What city are we talking about? Jerusalem. Yeah. They surrounded the camp of the saints about and the beloved city, and What happened to them? Was there really a battle? Was there really a final conflict? Was there sword raised against sword? Look here. And God, and fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them, cremated them. That's what happened to that army. That's what happened to those humans who let the devil deceive them into thinking that they could overthrow this iron rule of Jesus. Let's look at verse 10. And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone. Look at this. Where the beast and the false prophet are. Now remember, earlier they're up there in chapter 20, there, the first couple of verses, we read about where the Antichrist and his false prophet were defeated and thrown into the lake of fire. 1,000 years later, Satan is cast into that lake of fire, and the Antichrist, the beast, and the false prophet are still there. You do not get annihilated when you go to hell. Some people think, you just burn up, over and done with. No. 1,000 years later, the Antichrist guy and his false prophet are still there. When Satan is finally cast into the lake of fire, 1,000 years later, don't let somebody tell you that you just burn up in hell and that's over and done with. You do not get annihilated. That verse right there shows you. 1,000 years later, the devil's cast into the lake of fire, and the beast and the false prophet are there. And look at this. And they, including Satan, he torments you now. He aggravates you now. He puts thoughts in your mind now. He causes you to do things that you don't really want to do. And the beast and the false prophet and the devil, Satan, shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. So, we understand what's going to happen during the millennium, the 1,000-year reign. We understand how life is going to be on the earth at that time. And then Satan is released after the... Isn't it great that God tells us what's going to happen? Somebody asks you, what's this world coming to? Well, you can answer that question. God's telling us what it's coming to. It's coming to judgment, what it's coming to. But we can read this. We can understand it. God's telling us this. Why? So we can pat ourselves on the back and say, wow, man, I'm a Bible scholar. I can understand this. I can answer questions. Is that why? No. It's so that you'll have a burden for somebody who's not saved. A burden to ask him about the relationship with Jesus Christ. Ask him if they go to church somewhere. Start the conversation. I handed out a tract the other day. I'm not sure where I was at. Handed out one of them little cards we used to have. I got to see the preacher about getting more of these things. But had a little movie on the back of it, gospel tract. I handed it to him. And I said, when you get a 14-minute break, I said, there's a 14-minute movie on that there. I said, that QR code. I said, scan that. I said, there's a movie on there. I said, I think you'll like that. And he looked at it, he goes, oh, about the gospel. He said, yeah. He said, I'm already a Christian. I said, well, good. I said, watch that movie and then pass it on to somebody else. Hey, ask somebody about their relationship with Jesus Christ. Invite them to church so that they don't have to, because you know what's going to happen in the future. You know about the rapture. You know about the tribulation period. You know about the judgment of the nation. And you know about the 1,000-year reign of Christ. And you know about the final conflict over and done with. So let's go through this right here about this final conflict, because there's some things I want you to notice in here. For instance, look at this. It says, the devil's in verse 7 said, the devil's going to be loosed after 1,000 years, and he's going to go out to deceive the people. We already talked about who these people were that's going to be deceived. It says, from all four quarters of the earth. That's talking about the north, the east, the south, the west, all four corners of the earth. There's going to be people who's going to rebel, who's going to follow after Satan's deceitfulness, and they're going to rebel about towards Jesus Christ, just like he did with the angels in heaven. Remember, he convinced a third of them that they can overthrow Christ, and he was defeated then and cast out of heaven. Now, let me go through this here. It says in verse 8, and he went out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog. Where'd you hear that name at before? Ezekiel 38 and 39. But some people think that this battle here is that battle of Gog and Magog that Ezekiel 38 and 39 talks about. It's not the same battle. So somebody says, oh, it's the same battle. Well, let's look at the differences here, just real fast. In Ezekiel 38 and 39, he talks about a war that's going to happen in the future there. It's called the War of Gog and Magog. Ezekiel's war, different terminologies. But if you read that, don't get this mixed up with that one, because look at the differences. In the Ezekiel 38 war, Gog and Magog, they have weapons, spears, swords, bows. In Revelation chapter 20, the final conflict, remember, during the 1,000-year reign of Christ, there are no weapons. Remember, they turned their weapons into plowshares. They will learn war no more. In Ezekiel 38, God spares 1/6 of the enemy army. Here, everyone is devoured. They're cremated. A fire comes out of heaven, burns them all up. In Ezekiel 38, there's an earthquake that destroys part of that army that comes against Israel. Here, all we have is a fireball. See, there's a difference in that. Over in Ezekiel 38 and 39, it talks about the birds, Battle of Armageddon. The birds will be called in to eat the flesh off of the dead bodies and the horses. Over here, they're burned up. There is no body for the birds to eat. Over in Ezekiel 38 and 39, talk about Russia and 5 other Islamic nations are the ones that come against Israel. Russia from the north, and 5 other Islamic nations comes against Israel in that Ezekiel 38 war. Here, it's people from all over the world. All the humans from all over the world, all 4 quarters of the earth, are gathered to stamp out the Jewish people. Over in Ezekiel 38 and 39, it talks about it takes 7 months to bury all the dead. Here, there is no bodies to be buried. They're just consumed, cremated, ball of fire. Hey, you say, well, why do they call it Gog and Magog? You know, the Bible's full of symbols and illustrations, and you know how when God mentions Babylon in the Bible, is it ever good? Say, no. But he mentions Babylon and things like Babylon was. And it says Babylon this and Babylon that. He's not talking about, it's always bad stuff about Babylon because they were rebellious. They hated God. They hated the Jewish people. And it's a symbol. Anytime you see God referring to Babylon, it's evil and wicked. Here he uses this term here, the devil shall go out and deceive the nations, Gog and Magog, to gather them together against Jerusalem. Read it like this. He's using Gog and Magog like he does Babylon. Gog and Magog was a great rebellious army that comes against Israel. You can read about it in Ezekiel 38 and 39. But read it like this. I wrote this down. This is my explanation. Just like God uses the term Babylon to describe false religion and godlessness, he uses Gog and Magog to describe a great rebellion. That's what this is. The first Gog and Magog was a great sin against his people, Israel. So, knowing that, this is my translation of that verse. You don't have to quote this or nothing like that, but it helps me understand it better. Read it this way. Satan went out into all the world and raised a great army that numbered as the sand of the sea and brought them against God's people at Jerusalem, just the same as Gog and Magog did. Now that helps me understand it better. I don't know about you all, but it helps me understand it better. Now this army comes against Israel. Jerusalem surrounds it, God's beloved city. We know that. And then Satan is defeated and cast into this lake of fire. We're going to talk about Satan here now. He's cast into this lake of fire to be tormented forever and ever alongside his Antichrist guy and the false prophet who deceived the people during the tribulation period. Now, Satan is thrown in the lake of fire. Over and done with. He's never heard from again. But we're going to look at some verses. People say, this world, some people say that Satan is in hell and he rules hell. No. We read in 1 Peter that God's warning us about Satan through his prophet Peter, his apostle Peter. And Peter says, don't be tricked into thinking the devil is, he said, let me warn you. He said, the devil, he said, don't be deceived, be sober-minded. The devil walketh about on this earth, seeking, like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. So people say, the devil's in hell. He's the ruler of hell. No. He's on this earth, walking about, deceiving people, tricking them into not believing the gospel, the salvation plan. That's over in 1 Peter chapter 3, I think, verse 8, verse 5 through 8. But look over in Isaiah. Flip over in Isaiah. We're going to read the end of Satan. We just read there where he's defeated one last time, thrown into the lake of fire to be tormented forever and ever and ever. Is he going to be the king down there? This one-time great angel who was a cherub that guarded the throne of God? Look at Isaiah chapter 14 And we're going to read 9 through 17. Look at this. This is the end of Satan. The final conflict has happened. Satan is cast into that lake of fire. And look how he is treated down there. He's not the ruler or the king of hell. Look at this. Begin with verse 9. This is a description of Satan in hell. Remember, over in Matthew it said that hell was prepared for the devil and his angels, his demons. It wasn't prepared for us. There's a bunch of humans down there now because they didn't believe in the plan of salvation. They didn't believe in Jesus Christ. But when everybody gets down there in this lake of fire, look what happens to Satan down there. In verse 9, talking about him in hell. Hell from beneath is moved for thee, talking to Satan. Hell from beneath is moved for thee, to meet thee at thy coming. That's his end. He's going to end up down there. It stirreth up the dead for thee, even all the chief ones of the earth. It hath raised up from their thrones all the kings of the nations. Every powerful person who ever lived without Christ is going to be in this lake of fire. And they're waiting for Satan to get there. It said, it stirreth up the dead for thee. All of they shall speak and say unto thee, look at this. Is he going to be the ruler of hell? Look at this. All of those people in hell who are expecting him to come anytime, be cast into hell himself, it says, all they shall speak and say unto thee, art thou also become weak as we art? Art thou become like us? They said, you're nothing more than just like us, Satan. And we let you trick us. We let you deceive us. And you're right here beside of us. You're nobody. But it's too late now. We need to tell people that now. Satan may have a little bit of influence on us, a lot of influence, but he's nobody that we can't resist. Scripture tells us, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Look at this. Let's read some more about Satan. Verse 11. Thy pomp, thy pride, the position that you had, thy pomp is brought down to the grave. And the noise of thy vows, the worm is spread under thee, and the worms cover thee. Verse 12. Satan, how art thou fallen from heaven? O Lucifer, son of the morning, how art thou cut down to the ground, which did weakenest the nations? See how powerful Satan is? He was able to deceive the nations, millions and millions and billions of people. For thou hast said in thine heart, this is the reason he fell from heaven, cast out. He says, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. He's talking about, I'm going to overthrow God. I'm going to be on the throne of heaven. He said, I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. That was the devil's plan. But now he's cast into this lake of fire, and he's just like everybody else, being tormented forever and ever. Verse 15 says this, yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. They that see thee, the people in hell, when Satan finally gets there, those people that see thee shall narrowly look upon thee and consider thee, saying, is this the man that made the earth to tremble? That did shake the kingdoms? This is who did all of that? Well, he's nothing. He's just like us in hell. Is this the guy that made the world as a wilderness and destroyed the cities thereof, that opened not the house of his prisoners? Satan is not going to be the ruler of hell. He's there forever and ever to be tormented, just like everybody else in hell. Why do you need to know this? Because you've heard people say that too. All the devil's in hell, I'll just go down and join him. No, he's not. He will be, and you will be with him. But you're going to find out that he ain't so great. The final conflict. At the end of the 1,000-year reign of Christ, Satan is turned loose and he deceives the nations one more time from all four quarters of the earth. And rather than be a battle, there's not even a shot fired, an arrow loosed or anything, a spear thrown. Fire comes down from heaven and destroys a whole bunch of them. Not even any bodies to bury. And then Satan is cast into the lake of fire where the Antichrist guy, the beast, and the false prophet are, to be tormented forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever, and we could go on forever. Torment. You know somebody who's not saved? You know somebody who needs to know Jesus Christ? You know why now you need to tell them. You don't want them to face that, especially your loved ones who you know. You love them. You don't want them to go there. Why do we learn this stuff? Why did God write it all down? So we can have a burden for other people. Hey, we got to quit. Next week, we're going to look at the great white throne judgment, the final judgment. We looked at the final conflict. Next week, we're going to look at the final judgment. Over and done with. Eternity is going to start after that. Let's have prayer. Lord, thank you for everything you do for us. Thank you, Lord, for your word. Thank you for us to be able to read it, to understand it. Lord, to grow in our faith, to grow in our desire to see other people get saved, to tell them about your salvation plan. Thank you, Lord, for that. We pray, Lord, you'll be at today's service. I don't know who's preaching, whether it's going to be our Pastor Pinson or somebody else. But, Lord, bless the preacher, bless the message. May souls be saved, and may Christians be strengthened.